Welcome to the Thursday cross-reference episode of the Selah Time to Pause podcast from Plexus Salvation Army, an online church in the UK. On Monday, in our walk through John's Gospel, we came to a small, seemingly insignificant verse that sits between two larger stories without linking them together. A small one-verse story all on its own. A simple story that tells us of the importance of stopping to rest and which shows how Jesus modelled it. But sometimes that stopping doesn't come as an option, but is forced on us. And sometimes we get just so tired that there is no option but to rest. Today, we're going to think about just such a time for the Apostles Paul and Timothy.
2 Corinthians 1 verses 8 to 11 from the Message paraphrase. We don't want you in the dark, friends, about how hard it was when all this came down on us in Asia province. It was so bad we didn't think we were going to make it. We felt like we'd been sent to death row, that it was all over for us. As it turned out, it was the best thing that could have happened. Instead of trusting our own strength or wits to get out of it, we were forced to trust God totally. It's not a bad idea, since He's the God who raises the dead. And He did it, rescued us from certain doom, and He'll do it again, rescuing us as many times as we need rescuing. You and your prayers are part of this rescue operation. I don't want you in the dark about that either. I can see your face, even now, lifted in praise for God's deliverance of us. A rescue in which your prayers played such a critical part.
For when I stop and breathe in your presence, I find that you are the answer. You're all I need. And even when I don't understand, I know I am safe in your hands. Just breathe. Just breathe.
Mum, Dad and I had just returned from holiday in New Zealand. It had been a long flight but made much worse by delays. We'd had an 11-hour delay in LA, and though we were given $10 credit for food, that's not much in an airport at airport prices for that amount of time. And what was worse was that we had to stay in one small transit area. No opportunity to even go outside and get any fresh air. Just extra waiting in a small cramped lounge. By the time we arrived back at Heathrow Airport, we were all, as I learned to say when I lived in Scotland, wabbit. Totally wabbit. It's a fantastic Scottish word that describes a weariness that leaves your bones aching and your mind hovering somewhere outside your body, a real all-encompassing tiredness. Thankfully, we did not have to then find our car and drive back home, as we'd arranged for my sister to collect us, and so it was that she picked up our shattered remains at the airport, and we settled deep into the car seats as she drove us away. As we were approaching home, Eve turned and said to my father,
I can tell you're really tired.
Now, I would have thought it was quite obvious that all of us were absolutely, utterly, bone-shatteringly tired, and so I asked her how it was that she could tell specifically that Dad was tired, and her answer,
He didn't ask to drive.
Now that's amazing. And if you knew my father back then you would have known that there was something wrong too, because Dad always wanted to drive. No matter how tired he was, he simply hated being a passenger. But this time, after that long flight, the thought of driving himself hadn't even occurred to him. For some of us, that's the only way we'll ever give up the wheel to God. If we're just too whipped, too beat up, too tired to drive, it almost has to be an emergency before we'll relinquish control and submit to God's leading. But we were never meant to control the direction of what's going on in our life. And yet still we try, and we give God a major fight over the wheel, especially in areas of our life that really matter to us, where we want control. In our Bible reading, the Apostle Paul writes about the bombardment of pressure he was feeling, and his feelings probably echo yours at one time or another, because they echo mine. He says,
we were under great pressure far beyond our ability to endure.
Does that sound at all familiar?
We were under great pressure far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life.
This is heavy stress, growing discouragement, growing despair. How bad did it get? Paul says,
Indeed, in our hearts we felt the sentence of death.
it felt like they were going to die, at least emotionally. But there was a purpose for the pressures. Paul found that purpose, so can we. He says,
But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead.
he's essentially saying God allowed us to get really wabbit so that we would finally relinquish control and let him do it his way. In a sense, Paul just was too battle tired to drive anymore, and he said, okay, Lord, here, you drive. You may be one of those folks who really likes to hold onto the wheel of the things that matters in your life, taking your life where you want it to go, taking your friends where you want them to go, or your hobbies, your spare time, your financial plans. See, we all have holdout areas that raise their ugly fists against the lordship of Jesus Christ, but wherever you're insisting on control, you're out of line. But we get pretty tired from the battles, don't we? And that's when God brings us to the place where we are too tired to drive. At those times, it's as if he's saying to us, are you ready to finally relinquish that wheel? To finally give up trying to always do it your own way? In those moments of tiredness, we realise that we've tried it our way, and now we're faltering and we're beat and maybe ready to crash. That's the time we need to move over to the passenger side and enjoy the wonderful peace and rest of letting God do the driving. You can trust him. After all, he loves us.